Good morning, or I guess we're moving closer to the middle of the day. So my name is Leroy Hill. I'm the secretary for the council.
And you can take your mask off.
Yeah. My name is Leroy Hill. I'm the secretary for the council of the Haudenosaunee, and they've decided to issue a statement today of issues of concern regarding our lands and our people and our rights, and looking for the health and safety of everyone. So we welcome y'all here, and I've been asked by the chiefs and clan mothers to say a few words in our language to express our gratitude and give an overview of why we're here. And then Chief Haudenosaunee Roger Silversmith will read the statement. After that, there'll be some questions and question period. So welcome you all here on this fine spring day, huh? Down go here to know kasa went na here ne sungwa we ne sungwa ya disai dan wada no ha kan wa no we ka do ga wa don gwa ni go ha so da ne di na nanga skada di wat ka wana di he ha na ne ya ta de do hon jio na here nanga on ka wanda de to gwa ni yo ya ne nanga dan wada no ha a kwe ki ska no no to nyo da ni dokta di da ne di we hawana sa no hu de nanga hon go ya da yi stak kwa na yena aswayan di kya do ni hodi ni go he da hani da hadi go wanes da se nanga na hiya go ya da gwani onyo da na yedi go wisagi ha ti skano ayno to ni hek na yo na de dwade chani gai hiya ni nanga huwa he sta ni hadi ya do da na yedi na aswe hek yut ya tin de wad no ha skano dwano to ni da tadi ni yotik na hwa ni go ha da này ô nó nè cái hay sụt có hệ nó hiya hay nị đàn đó dễ nó nè cái gì đó ha nó nè cái này hạt đi qua nè số đi này so này ô nó còn này hiya cái ya đó còn nhiều nhiều cái ya này đó so này nè còn na đi vật đấy tôi nói về cái ha cái nó ai nó tôi nhiều hết cái vật gì cái ha da này đi nó nè cái suy hết thì suy ha so còn na đấy nè đó tôi nhiều tích số này có ha. So I'll just interpret a little bit. Our tradition is to express a few words of gratitude whenever our minds come together. So we give thanks for being together today, and we're bringing our minds together for a very important reason. So we give thanks for our wellness up to the present time, and also that they would like you to hear a huge and important issue of concern regarding our lands and the development of our lands that remain unresolved. The issue that you're here for is the position of the Council of Chiefs and all of the families that they represent and the clan mothers. They are looking out, as their duty dictates, to look out for the welfare of all people. Now, what is happening? The development it's uncontrolled, and it's not being resolved in a just manner, and they just keep issuing permits, development after development on unresolved lands, and in the meantime we're losing our ability to expand for our families, and they're looking for places to live as well. So the leaders have been mulling this over for a while, and what to do so to protect our future generation. So I'll turn it over to Chief Haudenosaunee Roger Silversmith, the Cayuga Nation chief. Anito.
Yeah. Scanos Cablego. Good morning to y'all, and thanks for coming. It's a good day. Not raining today, anyways. Again, I guess I'm just going to get right into the statement. It's really important that we put this statement out to the outside. Okay, I'm going to get started. In 2006, the Council of Chiefs of the Haudenosaunee Grand River Territory affirmed our land rights in the tract, confirmed by Governor Frederick Holloman on October 25th, 1784. In making this statement, the Council of Chiefs made it clear that we would hold certain land ethics and principles that must be respected in any agreements on land use or occupation. The Haudenosaunee and its governing authority have inherited the rights to the land from time immemorial. Land is a birthright, essential to the expression of our children, culture. With these land rights come specific responsibilities that have been defined by our law from the creation story, the original instructions, the great law of peace, the guiding of Shrek Goa, and the good message, the Gaiwio. Land is envisioned as a dish with one spoon. This means that we can all take from the land what we need to feed, house, and care for our families, but we also must assure that the land remains healthy enough to provide for the coming generations. Land is meant to be shared among and by the people and with other parts of the web of life. It is not for personal empire building. First and foremost, it is the concept that we are connected to the land in a spiritual way. The earth is our mother. She provides for our long-term well-being, provided that we continue to honor her and give thanks for what she has provided. We, the Haudenosaunee, have upheld our traditions, giving thanks through ceremony and cultural practices that manifest our beliefs, values, traditions, and laws. Planting, cultivating, harvesting, and gathering, and hunting and fishing also have spiritual aspects that must be respected and perpetuated, and the land is to provide for our future generations and the future generations of our neighbors. We are stewards. Our spiritual obligation is part of that stewardship. According to our law, the land is not private property that can be owned by any individual. In our worldview, the land is a collective right. It is held in common for the benefit of all. The land is actually a sacred trust, placed in our care for the sake of the coming generations. We must protect the land. We must draw strength and healing from the land. If an individual, family, or clan has the exclusive right to use and occupy land, they also have the stewardship responsibility to respect and join the community's right to protect land from abuse. We have a duty to utilize the land in certain ways that advance our original instructions. All must take responsibility for the health of our mother. Our ancestors faced overwhelming odds, relentless pressure to give up our lands. We all know that unscrupulous measures were employed to coerce our ancestors into selling the land. At other times, outright fraud took place, as was acknowledged in the Royal Proclamation of 1763. The agreements we recognize reflect an intention to share land and to lease land within the context of the covenant chain relationship with our nations, maintain the Crown or wampum belts. Treaty Council documents and oral history inform us that we always retain the right to hunt, fish, and gather upon our lands. This respects the spirit of sharing that we expect to continue and is another example of the dish with one spoon. We seek justice in our long-standing land rights issue. We seek an accurate accounting of the use and investment of the funds held by the Crown on our behalf, and the land transactions conducted by the Crown involving our lands. For nearly 200 years, our chiefs have been asking for such accounting and justice. Generations of elders have passed away with these matters unresolved. It is time to end the injustice. We want the land that is ours. We are not interested in approving fraudulent dispossessions of the past. We are not interested in selling land. Our faith in the Canadian people is strong, as we feel the majority of the Canadians also want to see justice on these matters. However, their elected representatives and public servants have failed to act effectively to address and resolve these matters. It is time to lift the cloud of denial and wipe away the politics that darken the vision of our future. It is time we are heard clearly. Our cases should be addressed with the utmost faith and respect. Today we are putting in place the moratorium on development in the Haldimand Tract. No development can proceed along the Haldimand Tract without the consent of the Haudenosaunee. The moratorium builds on our land rights statement to end the exploitation of lands and resources along the tract that marks a shift on land stewardship within the portion of the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee. We firmly believe that we respect and trust and will find mutual agreeable solutions that will reflect our long-standing friendship. We want the Crown to keep its obligations to the treaties to ensure all Crown governments, federal, provincial, municipal, are partner in those obligations. We want an honorable relationship with the Crown. We seek to renew the existing relationship that we had with the Crown prior to 1924. That relationship is symbolized by the thing which they link arms, a net sewed, as known as the Silver Covenant chain, peace and friendship. Our ancestors met repeatedly to repolish that chain, to renew its commitments, to reaffirm our friendship, and to make sure that the future generations could live in peace and allow the land to provide its bounty for the well-being of all the people. The covenant chain symbolizes our treaty relationship, also symbolizes by the two-row wampum, the Dikni Diha de Gaswenta, which affirms the inherent sovereignty and distinctiveness of our governments. An essential part of the relationship is our commitment to resolve matters through good faith negotiation between our governments. Our vision for the future is self-determined, based on an inherent right to protect our lands to the future generations of the Haudenosaunee children. The Haudenosaunee intend to exercise our jurisdiction over lands and waters in a way that maintains a delicate balance between creation and humans, focusing on sustainability, responsiveness, and climate change to protect the waterways and ecological sensitive areas. This moratorium is consistent with the previous statements and proclamations on our land rights. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs Council endorses and supports and recognizes that development should not be proceeding on our lands. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs, as chiefs and clan mothers, continue to support the efforts and stand behind our people who are protecting our land rights. As we continue to work on this process of respecting our land rights, we must always place our children in the front of our minds. We are committed to a peaceful resolution of these long-standing issues. Now that's
What happens moving forward? Like, walk us through what the plan is now. If a developer comes forward and does want to build on these lands, will there be some type of negotiation, or can you walk us through what will happen?
the Haudenosaunee Confederacy has put in place a body to deal with those issues. So if a developer feels he needs to develop, then he can go through that process of meeting with our people that we put in place.
And what kinds of things will you be looking for in the negotiation? Or, is there a way to have both parties be happy, or?
Well, that's the goal, right? Is for everybody to live in peace amongst each other, and one body taking majority of our lands and developing it, it's not fair to our people and to what's going on, what we see. It's our children who we are standing here for, the young ones who don't have a place.
So is there a possibility that if somebody did come forward and began this negotiation, that they would be allowed to build? If there was that proper discussion?
Sure, it's possible. There's always a possibility there, it depends what the land says in that area and the sensitive areas that we're protecting. So all those things kind of come together on that.
The tract is a quite large area, and there's a lot of already settled portions within that. So how would enforcement go about? How would you ensure that this moratorium is followed?
Well, that's, like I said, we have a body who's going to be looking after that. They're already out there and doing what they need to do. But right now, to me, it's more on the federal government and their side to step up and take charge on their side for their wrongdoings.
I suppose on that same note, if a developer chose not to go through the process and went through the provincial government or other bodies to get approval and went ahead with it, would there be a consequence for them from the from the Confederacy's perspective?
I can't really say to that because if they're going to go and develop and without our consent, it ain't no different what's going on today. And we've never given no consent for anybody to be developing on our lands like that.
15 years ago, the OPP came in and enforced an injunction, and they were here this past August enforcing more injunctions. What's really changed in the last decade and a half?
Really nothing, I guess, because it's been that long already. There's already been a generation of young ones who now are taking the land rights issues into their own hands to protect the lands. And these guys back then were just little guys. They were the kids back then. Now they're the adults who are defending our lands. And as this stuff carries on the way it is, it's going to be like that again. 10, 15 years down the road, it's going to happen again. But the next generation of kids are going to be defending our lands.
From 1924 to 1959 to 2006 and now 2020, the police have played a very specific role when it comes to Six Nations sovereignty. What kind of a role do you think they should play moving forward? Or what kind of a relationship should that look like specific to the police?
I think the police should take a role of, if they're calling themselves to be a police force to enforce laws on people and they should be looking at their own system. I think it's time for the OPP to turn around and look at their own people for what they're doing to our people. The stealing still continues today. And whenever they're going to step up and take that and turn around to look at their own people for what they're doing, that's what I'm hoping is going to happen with this federal government. Because to me, they're breaking their own laws. They're not following what was put in place.
Have there been any discussions with the Six Nations Band Council in terms of this and talking about it to
Yeah, there's been a little discussion there, and the elected band system is, like I said, they're under the Indian Act system, so they're kind of limited to doing the things that they can do. They don't
feel like they're on the same page?
they don't hold the same collective rights as the Haudenosaunee people.
You mentioned the federal government there, and we've talked to Skylar many times in months past about looking for communication with the federal government. Have you communicated with the federal government on this at all, and has there been any sort of message from them about how they plan to react to this?
There's been talks of going back to the table, but things with the COVID going on and everything's kind of slow, you know. And to me, like, a lot of these people, they take advantage of these situations like this COVID, and they use it for their advantage to move themselves forward in these land stealings of our lands.
Can you tell us a bit more about the process, the ideal process from your perspective in terms of the discussions and negotiations with the developers and Confederacy? What would that, can you be more specific about what that would look like?
I don't know if everybody else want to touch on that.
Sorry, what was the question? What was the question?
Well, I was looking to get some more specifics about the process, the ideal process that you'd like to see in terms of the discussions between possible developers and the Confederacy.
Well, you know, like this is an issue that I think lies solely at the feet of the Crown. They have an obligation to be coming to our community and dealing with our nations on a nation-to-nation basis. The fact that they've been away from this now for 9 months, have spent $20 million on policing, simply for peaceful occupation of our lands. As everybody needs to remember, this has been a peaceful occupation at 1492 Landback Lane for the last 9 months. To spend $90,000 a day in order to police that, which could have been remedied with a $60 in gas from Queen's Park, or maybe $100 in gas round trip from Ottawa. Like there was an easy pathway forward here, and there was absolutely no reason whatsoever that we're in this situation 9 months later or 15 years later when it comes to Gunastado.
So, but looking beyond what's happening currently, we're talking about potential future development all along the track. So, speaking of a process that would be that the Confederacy is presenting today, right?
So the Liberals certainly put together the Crown Indigenous Relations Minister and put together that office in order to deal with this. I would think to deal with Indigenous issues like this one, and that office should be setting up. There should be a trigger mechanism as soon as somebody makes a claim to these lands that there is somebody that is going to be coming to the table, coming to deal with this in a process that sees all sides needs met in this. And so that's developers, that's as well as the people from Six Nations.
Should developers expect that if they don't go through this process of coming to you negotiating, that what's going on at Land Back Lane will happen to wherever they want to develop?
You know what? There's 27,000 people at Six Nations, and there's many more that are anxious and willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that our land rights are upheld. One of the folks that we did ask to come down today was Matt Green. If you want to step up here, Matt, to be able to deliver some of that messaging, and maybe he can speak more to what the utter failure that the feds and the province have both dropped the ball in such a huge way on this.
I'll obviously begin by stating I'm obviously not a member of this government. I'm a elected member of Parliament representing Hamilton Centre, and I'm here at the invitation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I want to bring to light that over the last 2 weeks in the House of Commons, we have been debating this notion of the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. These are international laws that our government has signed on to, and the language of free, prior, and informed consent has been expressed here in a very clear way. That particular to the Haldimand Tract, there has not been free, prior, and informed consent. That our own laws under the Supreme Court in Delgamutte have determined ways in which hereditary chiefs have and clans have a title and hereditary title to these lands. And when I arrived here today, I recalled my first visit officially as a member of Parliament to the Confederacy back in September. And to think that 6 months have gone by while tensions have escalated and all communities impacted are also having to face COVID is a complete and utter abject failure of this government to negotiate in a good way, nation to nation. I'll go further to state that the presumption that land developments ought to continue through municipal permits or provincial permits, in my opinion, is absolutely the inappropriate place for long-standing, generations long-standing land claims within these territories. When the language of nation to nation is said by our Prime Minister, when the Prime Minister states that there is no more important relationship than that with Indigenous peoples of these territories, it is time for this federal government to live up to those words. It is time for this federal government to honor the very basic knowledge of free, prior, and informed consent, to acknowledge the collective land rights, and to acknowledge that these land rights are not for sale. I think what we've heard today in this statement is clarity coming from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council. And as a member of Parliament, one of 338 people, it is my intention today to take these words back to the House of Commons with the same clarity in which they've been delivered, to remind this government that it has a responsibility through their ministries, that in their mandate letters as signed by the Prime Minister, that they are to engage in good faith in a good way here in these territories. That has not happened. And in this case, this ongoing case, justice delayed is justice denied. And I think what they're asking for is very basic. That until these land rights are dealt with in a meaningful way, that there ought to be a moratorium on development. And I think any Canadian watching can understand that if there is a matter before the courts, that is incumbent on the parties not to proceed with developments that are contrary to the claims of this nation. And that in doing so, in proceeding without a clear decision being made on these disputed territories, that these corporations, in my opinion, are involved in material non-disclosure to the people who are buying these properties in disputed territories. That until these governments, until these developers can provide clear title to these lands, then they are in fact engaging in a de facto dispossession and land theft. These are not just my opinions. These are opinions that have been held up within high courts. And I think that even for the Canadians watching, they'll understand that this is just a part of a natural justice, an inherent justice, and one in which most Canadians, I think, would support with a little bit further understanding.
So what is the role of the federal government then in matters like this? Do you think the federal government has a place in matters like this?
I would go further to say this is the only appropriate place. There's a reason why, under the Indian Act, this remains under federal jurisdiction. That the minister, Mark Miller, and Carolyn Bennett have not come to these territories and negotiated with this nation in a good way is indicative of what they prioritize, which is the deciding, or I would say within the abrogation of their rights to provincial and municipal jurisdictions, to have the OPP use the state's monopoly on violence to displace people in these territories that are peacefully occupying their lands, is highly irresponsible, given what we've heard here today. And I join them in calling on the federal government to uphold their treaty rights.
The tract is a large area and it covers, this may not be a question for you, so
Sure.
it can be for whomever, but again, just to reiterate, the tract is a large area and I can understand where you're coming from completely, but there's likely a lot of development going on right now. So I guess what I'm hoping to understand is just kind of the practicality of this, how this actually, what this actually means today, what you want to see from it. Do you want all that development to stop now? Should those conversations start? That's the piece I want to make sure I understand.
I guess that's the whole ideal of putting the statement out, is that for the developers, that they need to stop digging in our lands and to come forward now and to do the process that's right. There's no more of taking our lands, and like this stuff has to stop what they're doing. They cannot proceed on digging our lands anymore and without the consent of our people. So anybody developing or in the process of it, they need to stop what they're doing.
You mentioned that the Confederacy has set up an organization. I want to make sure I understand. That's the HDI
Yeah.
you're speaking about?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The developers would say, whether it's Fox Cave here in Haudenosaunee or elsewhere, would say that it's not your land, right? That it's been legally surrendered over time. The province would agree with their own land registry system. I've been told that you have documents proving that the land remains in Haudenosaunee names. Is that the case? Do you have evidence that you could show to support the moratorium?
Well, the first thing out there is the land deed itself that they're passing around. It's not a land deed that we gave them. They're writing these land deeds up themselves, and they're passing them along and selling our lands with them. We've never agreed to any of these land deeds that they're passing around.
predecessors, the chiefs in the 1800s, those were not, in your eyes, legitimate sales?
There's some parts that have to go to the table and negotiate, and there's some lands that there's just no sale on those lands ever took place. It was just people taking the land for themselves and illegally.
Is there a solution that lies somewhere between physically taking the land back and using the colonial Canadian court system to resolve the underlying land title?
And for our people, we'll never win nothing in their courts. Their courts are made for them. The courts are set up to take our land, to steal our land. That's where the big problem lies.
So are you saying that no land will ever be sold, or yes, some people from outside can still come in, but they still have to go through the process?
Like I said, there's portions of land that we have leased out that can still be negotiated. But like I said, they have to come forward with all that.
So I think that's it for questions.
Yeah.
We just want to invite folks to the bear snacks on the porch and coffee. And thank you all for coming out.
Mm-hmm.